Hey, welcome back everyone. Here's this little Provost T34. It's an Airfix 1/72. Nice little kit. These are cheap kits, probably in the beginner category. Well, most definitely really. But it is interesting what you can do with these kits. In this case, I did take a bit of extra care, partly because of interest in a few other things going on. I made it a bit more challenging for myself because I did the Cranwell Royal Air Force College 1962 version, which just a little bit different, and for some reason I've picked up a bit of an interest in the 50s, 60s aviation. No idea why. I used to get a bit bored with it, or probably it was one of those things almost, what is it, rebelliousness against my father or something like that. It was just a bit too close to home. But as I've gotten older, definitely lately I've been a lot more interested in that period. And it is very much an interesting period, especially for British aviation. There was so much going on. But here it is anyway. It's a nice little kit, so we'll get into it in a second. One other thing, this is a bit of a long video, partly because I've changed my camera setup, which is good. So I'm always welcoming of feedback on that side of things. In my case, it meant it was a bit easier for me just to build without necessarily having a camera in front of me and so on. The flip side of that is that I ended up with a lot more footage or film, video, whatever it's called these days. So that did work out well. And it's captured a lot of things that maybe I haven't been in the past. So there definitely is a bit of extra detail. The other one that I'd just say, getting a bit of housekeeping out of the way, this video is a bit of a late arrival. I got caught up with some dental surgery and so on the last couple of weeks. So yeah, apologies for that. Anyway, straight into it. Again, this is the newer Airfix plastic. I can't remember when this is. I think it's a 2016 build. These have been around forever, on and off. I think I wouldn't be surprised if there was Airfix versions of this back in 1970 or something. So I'm going to just walk you through this. Obviously at this point we're just pulling plastic apart. The cockpit itself, it's nicely done. There's no great issues there at all, and the tooling itself is nice. Again, just keep in mind that this is a $20 kit. I can't remember exactly what I paid, but it would have been around that. So £10 if you're in the UK, whatever, USA would be $10 or something too, I guess. 8, don't know. So I'm just working through here doing this cockpit. Most of it obviously is self-explanatory. There's no huge surprises at all, especially at this level. I was interested in the way the wheel wells were molded. It's one of those curious ones. I did mention it in the inbox review I did the other week, but I haven't really figured it out, and it's not saying I'm going to lose a lot of sleep over. I have a feeling that the original versions were fixed undercarriage, and I don't know if it's something to do with that or not. So some of you who know way more about these will be able to let me know in the comments. That's one other thing I'd say. Definitely do hit me up in the comments. I like learning from people. I've actually learnt a lot since I've started doing this, just from comments. And like I say, always happy to get feedback on things I could improve or do better. There's no fit issues at all with this kit. I'll just put that out there. There's nothing to worry about. I'm just gluing these. So it's sometimes what I'll start again. I'm gluing these in the sense that for small parts I find it easier sometimes to keep the brush fixed and dip the end of the small part that I'm gluing onto the brush, if that makes sense, rather than trying to put big blobs of glue all around. I do use Tamiya glue, no real reason for that. I think it's just habit at this point. I think they're all much of a muchness. You'll get your own preferences, and there's no point trying to convince each other which one's better and so on. I think chemically they're all roughly the same. So there's that center console. I'm just lining it all up, trying to make sure it all sits straight before I let it dry. Interestingly, I did go back and have a look at the prototype on the cockpit colouring, and I've noticed again, as part of my exploration into that 50s, 60s, it's either going to be black or grey, basically navy or gold grey, because I think there was a changeover. The older planes tended to be black, and then maybe mid-50s there was a switch over to a lighter cockpit. Again, that's my understanding of what's happened there. Again, at this scale and price point, you're not going to get super detail in any of the cockpit sections, so don't get your hopes up there. Having said that, you can still get a nice finish if you spend the time. One of the obvious ones, especially on these little Airfix crew, is the seam lines. Do clean them up, scrape them away, because what can happen is as soon as you put paint down, they'll stand out like, yeah, proverbial so-and-so's on a bull. It's especially these shoulder areas. The seams, yeah, they stand out a mile away. The Airfix kits are really nice, and I'm glad Airfix still has the pilots or the air crew. It's just a nice little finishing touch. Tamiya and so on, I think it's almost hit and miss if you do get it, or often you've got to pay extra. Now, I know a lot of people are going to go, they're not the best, but again, they keep me happy and they keep lots of kids in the hobby. And who hasn't made aeroplane noises when you're building a plane? I'm happy to hands up admit I do. But on the cockpits themselves, yes, it's not going to be anything super detailed. But if you do take a bit of care, put in a little bit of extra work, you can get at least a satisfactory finish. And you'll see this as we progress in the build. So I'm just coming back. Again, I followed the prototype rather than the instructions as such, although I think the instructions seem to match what I saw, and that was just a dark cockpit interior with highlights of grey. So that's why I'm coming in here doing the flight sticks. The instrument panel is a decal, which again at this scale I'm quite happy. It doesn't bother me. You don't need 3D printed parts at that level. This is my homebrew British standard sort of green. I think I've had it for years now, and I just tend to add and mix a bit of new colour in it occasionally. It's originally Tamiya paints. What I did do is I come over these figures once I'd cleaned them up. I think it was Mr. Surfacer 500, and then I've come back and I'm airbrushing from the top. Almost, it's a bit overkill at this point, but a bit of practice just to try and give at least a bit of shading. So that's the figures at least base coated. Now I'm coming in and cutting out the decal for the instrument panel. There's no great mystery in this. I think I've mentioned it before. When I was a kid, I'd tend to just stick the whole sheet on a tray of water and get into the inevitable mess. I'm not being too delicate here. These are just to glue the seats in. Basically a blob of glue, and they're a sand colour. Again, I've tried to take a bit of care on the cockpit, at least to the point of where it's visible, especially on something like a trainer here, where they do tend to have a large canopy, which means you can see more of the internals. I don't go crazy on this, and in truth there was probably just a bit of distraction. As I said the other week, I had an operation, so this was one way just to switch off a bit. Tweezers to get that, well, decal of the instrument panel on. Bit of messing around, but no great dramas there at all. I didn't even come back with softener on this. I actually like the decals in the 1/72 instrument panels. It's just a quick, easy way to get something that at least looks good. And yeah, there's no way you could be really hand painting at this scale. And like I say, aftermarket parts, it would have to be a really nice kit before I spend too much on aftermarket. And in this case, for a $10 or $20 Australian kit, I'd be spending $20 on an instrument panel. That makes no sense. You're best saving aftermarket parts for a decent base kit. I've just come in here with, this is just white acrylic over the top, just to do the helmets. Again, I've just used what reference photos I could, and the instructions I think did have white. Painting the boots for no other reason than, I guess it's almost OCD at this point, just to have black boots. I'm not sure if they'll ever be seen again, but it's almost a completeness. This is almost just a standard Tamiya flesh, just to give that, again, indication of a face. At this scale, with these bog standard figures, yeah, I don't worry too much. The flesh color is all I need. What I've done here is added my custom seat belts. I'm just cutting very thin strips of masking tape, and as you can see, tweezers, and they just tack in, dab of glue, and they'll be sealed forever. And I think that's a really cheap, easy way to make belts or harnesses. So you can see it's a bit fiddly, and they want to stick to everywhere but where you want it to, but it just gives that little extra bit of detail and really clean edges for those harnesses. So again, if you're willing to take a bit of time, you can get a nice effect. And especially, like I said, the canopy on these is quite large, so they are visible. So that's it coming together. Like I said, for a $20 kit, I'm pretty happy with where that's at the moment. Okay, so in the background I just used an old etching as my ruler to cut that tape. The fuselage halves go together reasonably well, no great dramas, no, you shouldn't have any problems. Little bit of forcing, but I think that was more because I was messing around with it. In one of my genius indecisive moments, I decided to put a weight in the nose. I wasn't sure if I would do it undercarriage down or not at this point. That was just a little bit tight as I brought the fuselage together. So what I'd say is that one was totally on me, nothing to do with the molding or tooling. I'm just coming across here, gluing the seams, just some thin cement. As I always say, be careful when using that, but right tool for the job. This all goes together reasonably well. One thing I would say is at the fore edge, there was probably, I don't know, tenth or really not much. If you weren't fussy, a tenth of a mil or so that it was out. It wasn't a huge one, but again, at least for me, if going to do it, it's easier just to clean that up. And you can see there that it doesn't quite sit as neat as it should. Again, if you're just having fun, it's not something noticeable, but in this case what I did was just clean up that lip, and I thinned it down a bit. Yeah, it wasn't much, but again, it's one of those ones, it's in an awkward spot, so from the side you'll actually see it if you don't get it to sit properly. Another way to do it if you're younger or you don't have a chisel blade is just to put a dab of glue on that lip and let it sit for a few minutes. What it will do is then soften it up, so then you can push it to get the neater fit. It's worth doing, because otherwise you're going to have a fair bit of hacking and sanding and messing about at best later on. So here we are onto the wings. It's 3-piece wing. Again, nothing super extraordinary here. The fit is good. Any fit issues on the whole, it's been totally on me. Well, I can't really even think of anything beyond that lip. What I do tend to do is I'll deliberately leave the sprue excess as I'm putting these together. There's a simple reason for it. If I clean it up too much to begin with, then I can lose track. So from my point of view, it's almost like flagging where I need to come back and clean up. If I do it too neatly to begin with, what happens, or typically what I'll do, is start painting or priming and then think, oh, I missed a bit. So it's just one way I do it to remind myself. So we're on to the tail and rudder. This goes together very easily. 2 pieces, glues on. There's no huge configurability on a kit like this, but sometimes that's nice. At this point, I've decided that I'm going to do it in flight. I've got a bunch of stands there. It's another way just to free up some room, and it's a nice looking plane, something different. Like I said, the 50s, 60s seems to be something I'm interested in at the moment. And I've always had an interest in the trainers. No idea why, but it's one of those things. So at this point, we're largely done. I should note that I haven't put on the elevators. And the reason for that is that now I'm largely onto the painting, and it'll make the painting and masking much easier. I'm doing something a bit different here, and that is I guess it's anti-reflection black on the nose and around the cockpit. I'm doing that first. Traditionally, I've tended to come back and do that last, but in this case, it was almost an experiment on my part to do it first and then mask it out, especially given the complications of the paintwork on this plane. Because as I say, I'm doing RAF Cranwell, which is Royal Air Force College, and it's quite a complex scheme, and we'll see that as we progress. For the canopy, it's just, I use canopy glue, but I'm pretty sure it's just white glue, PVA. One nice thing, and it's useful to know this, is that if you get this wrong, just add some water and it'll dissolve back, start again. So I'm coming through toothpick, getting all the seams, because this is one of my own little self-improvement things where I decided I need to get better, and that is on sealing the canopies. So I'm taking a bit more extra care on doing that. And I will come back here and fill in some of the gaps as well. As you all know, the clear plastic's much more brittle, so it's not always that easy to get a good edge on it. So I did take some extra care there. I think 2 or 3 times I come back just to make sure it was sealed properly. So as I said, I've done the black on the nose, and now what I'm going to do is just come and mask that whole, it's almost a semi-ellipse shape, and then once I've got this structured right, then I'll fill it in, and that's effectively layer 1 of my masking. I am taking my time on this because I think this is just 1mm masking tape, and I'm using a split razor to do the detail work, because I was actually taking a bit of care to get the actual step that's on the prototype. It's not a one-piece continuous line, if that makes sense. So it is stepped, and you can see it there. The razor I tend to use, I don't like showing it as much because obviously that's use at your own risk, but it's almost my go-to these days for anything super detail and canopy work. At this point, I'm just press fitting all this together because I do want to be able to take it off. The intakes, they go together easily enough. I'm just holding it together, a bit of thin cement, it soaks through capillary action. I did mess around trying to get the grey I wanted. In the end, I settled for that Mr. Colour number 73. The prior version I used, it was just that little bit too yellowish. I used to laugh at the thought that you would get into big issues about what grey to use and so on. Grey's grey, but you can actually see there the earlier coat, it was just a little bit too yellowish for me. So if you do make a mistake or you're not happy with it, easy enough, just come back and do it again. Yeah, you can see there, it was more of a, just a bit too much yellow in there. Airbrushing, as always, it's just practice. Like anything, the more you do, the easier it gets. Although I still screw up a lot. I just don't show those bits as much. I would say though that the lacquers does make it easier. Again, if you've got a good setup and do it outside, not a big problem. I do find them much easier than the acrylics as such. Although, like anything, I tend to use, well, I do use all different paints, and we can see that as we progress, because what I'll tend to do is my base coats are always lacquer, and then I might come and do final detail work with acrylics. So the red, this is where it's quite cool. I've got crazy layers of masking going on at the moment, and yeah, I did, I think it was just 1 mil to do the curves, takes time, and then I've just used normal masking tape for the bulk of it. This is always the fun part, getting all that masking off. Some of it I have to cut off because I think it was getting pretty deep at this point. On the whole, it did all go well. I did screw up on one, I think it was the left wing, but it's not something I was going to get too hung up on. And sometimes it's just a question of a little bit of touch up and you're good. So that was why I did leave the elevator off, because I wanted to be able to get that really nice edge on the tail with the red. So you can see there's a little bit I missed on my masking, or I got through, and a bit of bleed there, but I just come back and touch that up. And interestingly, I do touch that up with acrylic, because the base coat is lacquer. When I come back with acrylic, it doesn't mess anything up. It doesn't, what will happen, for example, if you're using Tamiya, which I got more experience with, if your base coat's Tamiya and then you come back and try and touch up with Tamiya, it can end up just lifting off. So there's the guts of the paint scheme done. And at this point, I'm happy. There's a couple little bits, like I said, to touch up. Now I've got another bit of masking to do, and this is the inboard red sections on the flaps. This is a pretty straightforward one. Most of the work was actually just in, not so much masking where I wanted to paint, but covering the rest of the plane to prevent overspray. For the exhaust itself, I just come over with some gunmetal. I have masked the top because the top is actually the aircraft grey. So at this point, it's looking pretty cool. So you always get a bit of a kick when you pull the tape off. Well, so long as it goes well. And I did use a lot of masking. Interestingly, for a small kit, and I think this is always something to keep in mind, for a small, like I say, £10 or $20 kit, you can make as much of it as you want. I know these days money's on everyone's mind and so on, but you don't have to go spend $200 or £100 and all that to have fun. I think I spent maybe 10 days or 10 evenings working on this. So given, I don't know, price of beer is about the equivalent here at the moment, you can get a lot of fun just out of a cheap kit. And I almost find it a bit, it's the wrong word to say cheap kit, because they are, like I said, it kept me amused for a good few evenings over a week or two. And I think there's always that challenge of just, at least personally, seeing how good you can do it. And like I say, even these cheaper ones, again, I don't think I've ever done one that I'm entirely satisfied with. There's always something I know I could have done better, or mistakes I've made that you aren't going to necessarily tell everyone that looks at it, but you know yourself, yeah, I could have done that a bit better, or wish I hadn't done it that way. So here I'm just removing the canopy masking, very much we're getting into the final stages. I do use a toothpick mostly on the canopy. Obviously, there's no point taking all that care and then butchering it. So here I'm just coming in with some acrylic over the top, and I'll use different degrees of acrylic. I've never quite figured out the exact mechanics of it, but in that case I come over with some Tamiya, and in the final stages I used some MiG ammo. So this is the scheme I'm doing, Royal Air Force College, Cranwell. It does have these, I don't know, nice blue bandings. Again, I'm using decal. I'm not even sure at this scale if it would be worth airbrushing it. You would definitely get a nicer finish if you did go to that extent, but yeah, there's always limits, I suppose, at least on my part. The problem, and you can see it here, is where you're essentially trying to get a straight edge on a curved surface. So there's some interesting topological mathematics, I guess, going on there. And in my case, or in this case, I just eyeball it to the best I can. Is it perfect? No, but again, on a shelf and from a distance, it's fine, compared to spending days trying to get that absolutely perfect. So at this point, the roundels are going on, standard Airfix decals. In case you were wondering, I did mask the paint scheme to at least the degree of having the hinges masked. So that's why the broken edges are there. Again, just coming through at this point doing decals. The only decal on this that I would give a heads up to anyone who's planning to do it is be careful with the under wing lettering, because they're big lettering and you can almost get into a bit of a tangle if you're not careful. I ended up sliding them off the decal sheet or off the backing. So it's starting to look pretty cool at this point. Put the little number on the nose. It just shows the difference. I think back in the day, the RAF had enough planes that it was almost like a rental. So there's the ones I was saying. Yeah, just be careful of those ones. It was much easier just to slide them straight off the backing onto the wing, because like a lot of lettering, it can start getting twisted and fold back on itself. Here I'm just doing some final straightening up on things, and this one, it's just the walkway on the inboard of the wing. So there you have it, a nice little kit at a great price, no complaints from me. And as I say, you can put as much work in as you like. A lot of fun. Hope you've enjoyed that one. I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe out there and happy modelling. Thanks again. Bye. Hey, you still watching? Yeah, you. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Definitely subscribe. It does help me out. I hope you enjoy what you're seeing. And once again, thanks again. And especially in particular, you, if you've managed to watch through to 28 minutes and 45 seconds. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks again. Bye.